the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 668. I'm Tom Cagley, your host, and we are back from backpacking on Isle Royale. Simply awesome. Today, we feature a discussion with Tom Henricksen. You know Tom from the Agile Online Summit and the DevOps Online Summit. However, Tom is more than just the summits. Today, we discuss learning and then get into whether hybrid work scenarios are all they're cracked up to be. I'm not sure we agreed. Tom Henricksen is a technology professional with over 20 years of technical experience. He's worked as a developer, team lead, Scrum Master, and manager. Tom is the founder of the Agile Online Summit. Links, by the way, in the show notes for the Agile Online Summit. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Tom Henricksen, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Great to be here, Tom. I always enjoy the conversation and have a lot of fun, and definitely enjoy. I'm a listener too, so I enjoy what you put out. You do a lot of great interviews.
Thank you, Tom, and I enjoy having you on the cast. I don't know, we've come up with some great topics over the years, but before we dive in, the Agile Online Summit is coming up. I would say not only are you the impresario of the Agile Online Summit, you're the impresario of the DevOps Online Summit kind of thing too. So you have a lot of exposure to this whole world of doing these conferences online. And I think before we're on the air, we're noting that a lot of people are late to the ballgame, and I'm not saying that they're trying to rush in. It's been an interesting year and a half. Now, it may still be an interesting year and a half in another year and a half, but regardless, right? Yeah. You were there early on. Before we promo the event, before we talk about what's coming up, what's new, and all that kind of stuff, why are people interested in going to online? What are you seeing in terms of trends on the online kind of engagement and things like that these days?
Well, as I mentioned, Tom, there's getting to be more competition, and I'm not going to say that's bad, because I think that's been good, because that reminds me and all the other people who do these online events that we need to up our game. We can't just throw on Zoom and put things together in a rinse and repeat fashion. We have to look for different ways. And that's the thing I think that's been fun. Obviously, the technology is changing fast. As we've lived through this far into the pandemic. Like you mentioned, we don't know when it's going to end. There's no stop sign that says, okay, it's done now. But as we remember early on, Zoom had a lot of problems. They've made some changes. There's been a lot of competing technologies that have come out, and I'm looking at lots of different things as I look at the Agile Online Summit, and then of course, as you mentioned too, I do the DevOps Online Summit too. So there's a lot of different ways to build in that interaction. When we go to the traditional event and we have those conversations, say, hey, Tom, we catch up and we have a conversation about various things. There's a lot of technology that's really starting to get to the point where we'll be able to, kind of build in that type of engagement. So it's really changing a lot. It's been kind of fun just to be at this point in time and see kind of it all come about.
Now, you also, you sort of chair one of Vasco Duarte's group of media in terms of interviewing people from across the globe, having moderating those interactions. Is all is probably the wrong word. Is the majority of learning in this sort of interactive scenario? Obviously, it's online during the whole pandemic thing. What do you think it is in a year and a half? Wave a magic wand, the pandemic's over. What is it going to look like in a year and a half?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, so the technology is coming out fast and furious. We're seeing a lot of different things. I think, event organizers, and I talk to a lot of them too, from your in-person groups that have been, moved online, or, large events like this. They're starting to look at things, obviously the hybrid thing is going to, I think, be something that we're probably going to have going forward. Because I think too, and you probably see this too in the companies you work with, Tom, there's a lot of companies that say, oh, I haven't sent all these people to conference XYZ. I didn't have to pay for flights. I didn't have to pay for, hotel. And that's the thing. And even kind of as we talk pre-call, some of us have been on planes and stuff this year. It's not easy to get around. And I think that's the thing. It's going to be interesting to see how companies say, okay, we're going to allow only so many people do perhaps in-person events, that they're going to, curtail that. I don't, who knows, but I think we need to be ready as we put together these events to be able to engage people if they want to be in person or they want to be virtual, and make it so it's value add both ways. It's not just like, oh, here's some recordings for you and, good luck.
I'm going to say something controversial. It's one of the first times in my life that I've ever been controversial. I don't think hybrid events or purely online events, when they can open up, purely online events probably better than hybrid. Hybrid, I don't see a ton of value out of,
Yeah.
because the people that are there will connect. They'll have the conversations in the hall. They'll go up to the podium afterwards and have that conversation. The person online is just going to be shut down. If it's online only, you can build that in, but it's really
Yeah.
hard for someone to stand and have that conversation after that, and also do it online over here. So hybrid, I think, is a red herring. I
Yeah.
think one or the other is probably valuable. This let's not be fish or fowl, I actually don't think is valuable.
Yeah. Well, I would just push back a little, Tom. And I think I would push back in the sense that, in the Agile community, we talk a lot about facilitation. And I know like Lizette Sutherland has done a lot of work with remote working, and there's a lot of other people in this space. But I think what we need to think about is how we facilitate that conversation. If, for instance, like say, you're near Cleveland and they might have a meetup there, that we want to be able to have a group of people who meet in Cleveland, but maybe there's a few people in Chicago and Indianapolis that want to see. I think part of that is we need to learn how to facilitate that conversation so that, if we have people in that room in Cleveland, hypothetically, that we able to have them be part of the conversation, but also to those people, whether it's Zoom or whatever that technology is, we need to learn new facilitation techniques and be able to include people, because I think the world is changing and we need to change with it.
I don't disagree that the world is changing, and I'm really fond of the world changing. I just don't think half is going to work. And I'll take it one step further. This idea of bringing people back in hybrid workspaces,
Yeah.
where some people are in the office and some people get access to their boss. They can have the conversation in the men's room or the ladies' room or the cafeteria, and those
Yeah.
people are home. The people who are home, and there's all sorts of good data, are never going to get promoted. And never is not the right word, because we know that any absolute is not true, but they have a significantly higher hurdle. I think the same thing's true in this learning space.
Well, I guess I would agree with you, Tom, that there's a challenge for people who work remotely. But there again, kind of like with the facilitation techniques, I think there's training and things out there for, because you've probably seen this too, a lot of things for, being the remote manager and things of that nature. I think, as you mentioned, if we bring people back to work, I think one of the things is some people enjoy working remotely. Some people, some companies I know, for instance, like I used to live in the Midwest in Des Moines, Iowa. Not everybody wants to move to Des Moines, Iowa. If you want certain talent, you have to be able to open up to some remote employees. And that's the thing I think where companies are going to have to, and that's the thing too, you probably see this, Tom, too, is a lot of senior leadership are very skeptical of this. But I think as things change, in organizations that are going to be able to thrive in this model are going to have to be able to look for ways to, work with people who maybe aren't in Cleveland, or like I'm near Philadelphia, be able to work with remote people and make it a strength, as opposed to kind of like what you're talking about. It's like, oh, we have people that work remote, but it doesn't really work the greatest.
Well,
And that's
I'm
part of
I'm
the
good.
problem.
Again, I'm good with remote. I just think this half model, there is no data that suggests that works. Half models, whether it's my current term is half-assed agile, right? If there are a lot of, we're not going to make any decisions. I'd rather be fully remote, or I'd rather be fully on site. The mixture from a consulting point of view is okay because I'm not looking to move up the corporate hierarchy, right? But if I'm in the organization and I'm interested in the corporate hierarchy, I don't think that being remote is conducive. And maybe there are ways to facilitate. Maybe some organizations can do that. But again, I think having those intimate conversations, and that's one of the reasons why when you talk about the Agile Online Summit and finding those mechanisms to have that interaction, that's where the serendipity happens. And that's why things like, and I, great conference I was at this afternoon while I was working on one laptop, listening on the other.
Yes.
The Mad City group up in Madison.
Yeah, Jeff and Jeff from
Yeah,
Agile
absolutely.
Wire. Yep.
And it was Jeff and Chad, and they had, including one of the talks was from Johanna Rothman, who is one of my all-time favorites. Great conversation, good, interesting stuff in the chat, but no interaction after the chat window, right? So, and really hard to have that follow-up conversation in the hall kinds of things. So, you found ways to deal with that kind of stuff, or at least you moved down the road toward it. You know, I can remember the first Agile Online Summit, which was pretty tame in comparison.
Primitive. Yeah.
What would you say the biggest difference between this one coming up and the first one was?
I think, just as in this agile space, Tom, we all are learning. And I think I've learned a lot. And then two, some of the people that have been with me understand how it works. Two, we have, for instance, we have a few of our speakers that, like this year, we have Casey Kremnick, who was, she was a speaker for the Women in Agile track last year. She's a track chair this year. So these people kind of know. But I do like to bring in some new people that have not been part of this event as well as track chairs too. So it's kind of like, bringing in fresh ideas, and it just kind of like with your podcast, Tom, you don't want to have the same people on all the time. You want to bring in some new people from time to time. And that's the same thing with this event. We try to bring in some fresh faces and some new ideas and really learn. And like I mentioned, we've been living through this for a while. We're starting to learn about how to engage people in this medium.
You're doing the 5th edition. It almost sounds like a singing group from the 1960s. When you're doing the 10th edition, where do you see this at?
The 10th edition, that's a good question. I guess I would think that hopefully as you mentioned, the technology's probably changed. We probably learned a few things. We're able to, build in even more engagement. This year, the goal is 10,000 people, but I think, part of that is we want to bring people that are, getting value from this event too, not just, just 10,000 for a number, but to get people to talk about it. One of the things is I've done this for, as you mentioned, for 5 years. Hopefully by the 10th year, most people will know about it by then, because I always run into this. I don't know why, Tom, but so the conference ends on October 27th. So I will, it seems like naturally have a conversation like 10 days after. So sometime in mid-November, somebody will say, oh, I wish I would have known about that. It's like, I'm doing everything I can. If you follow me on, Twitter or LinkedIn, and, I'm talking to Tom and other people, it's like, I try to do everything I can, but, just want to get the word out and let people know, because as you know, Tom, in this space, in the Agile space, like you talked about Johanna, she's going to be part of our event too. And she is one of those people who really epitomizes this. She's willing to give, willing to share all she has. She's written, I don't know if you even know how many books. It's a lot. I know that, but she's free to share that, a lot of stuff. Not that it's free to give away, but she is has been on my part of my event before. I've interviewed her, as you mentioned, like we do the Agile Online Meetup monthly. She's been on that as well. And she is somebody that shares a lot of these people. You mentioned the Mad City Agility. So Jeff and Chad, they do a great job. And Jeff do the Agile Wire, another great podcast. There's, people that are willing to give a lot of this information and share. And that's part of the thing I think is so great about, being in this space. That's why I enjoy it so much.
It has been remarkable. Why do you think this kind of connection, this kind of sharing of information works in the Agile world, and it doesn't work in others?
Yeah, I think part of it is just like I mentioned, the people are willing to share, willing to give. And I think too, a big part of it is, as you know, Tom, a lot of these people work, for instance, like I've had, Bob Galen on and Jeff Watts, and a lot of these people realize that, to be in this space, you kind of, like we talked about, Jeff Boobles, for instance, they do consulting, and they realize they have to put their name out. That's kind of part of it, I think, that we need to share. It's kind of our, a bit of marketing, really. But like I said, too, they're really willing to share and help people out. I think part of it is, a lot of these people just want, as we kind of, like you talked about I won't say the word you said, but the half A agile. But, a lot of people are feel passionate about it so much that a lot of times, and you probably run into this too, where you'll talk to an agile coach or a scrum master that left someplace because the company wasn't bought into doing it the way they thought. They feel so passionately about it that they'll, forego a paycheck and look for something else because they feel so passionately about it.
I have fired clients.
Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the way we feel. So I think that's part of it too. It's that, we enjoy this stuff. We kind of live and breathe it. So, and that's part I love learning and listening and talking to the people in this space.
The Agile Manifesto is it is past its teens. It is in its early 20s at this point.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you're listening to this a few years from now, it's in its mid 20s. This is not a spring chicken. We have organizations that have still not embraced Agile, or they're now trying to transform. The ones that are trying to transform, why have they waited so long in your estimation?
I think a lot of it gets down to, and it kind of, we started this conversation, Tom, if you remember, talking about, kind of remote versus hybrid and how things change. And I think a lot of it has to do with how organizations, a lot of them don't want to change. So for instance, I've worked a bit in the financial services sector. There's a lot of companies in that space that don't want to change, but they see some of these, little startups and doing some crazy stuff, kind of nipping at their heels and stuff. But, a lot of us, and myself included, a lot of us don't want to change. I think, I don't know if I've told you this story, but, you kind of know, I used to live in Des Moines, Iowa, and our family moved here about almost 3 years ago today. And that was a big change. And any change like that, we kind of learn that as, agilists, we think, oh, we can take change, but we learn how it can affect us. And, we need to learn how to better enable organizations to do that. Cause it's not easy. If it was easy, Tom, as you know, everybody'd be done and we wouldn't need the Agile Online Summit.
No, we'd be looking at something next, sort of the post-Agile world, which sooner or later we are going to get to the post-Agile world. There is always something next. I think you've been in the industry long enough. I've probably been in it a few days longer. I've seen a number of these turn. We've had the great quality movement of the 1980s. We've had, the case movement, which was going to solve everything. We had the CMMI was going to solve everything. Well, first it was a CMM, then it was a CMMI. They were all going to solve everything. Now we have Agile is going to solve everything. Nothing ever does. There will be something next. Tom, if you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you your caffeinated beverage of choice. Your caffeinated beverage of choice is? Okay, well, yeah. You never know these days, right? Yeah. I have friends that live in the Deep South, and they'd say, hand me my ice-cold Coke. And it might be a Pepsi, too, but everything's a Coke, depending on where you are. So, caffeinated beverage of choice and a magic wand, and said you could have any two wishes affecting how people absorb and gather information. What would those two things that you would wish and make happen be, and why?
Yeah, I would say the first one, I guess, would be, as we just spoke about, making that ability for change easier for all of us. And I think the second one I would think would be something along the lines of really helping us understand how much we need to make, certain things habits. And I think, for instance, like if you take, for instance, Scrum, it kind of has some daily habits built in. I think those are things that we need to think about how we can, if we want to make a small change, we need to, make a small change in our life or in an organization or a team. What's something small we can do just to kind of facilitate that, to let that grow on? Like, for instance, like if we have a daily stand up or a daily scrum, we have something else where we want to try to do something to, affect that change and make it last.
How can people continue the conversation? How can they reach out, find Tom Henricksen, get him involved in their lives?
Yeah, I think the best is just to go to the agileonlinesummit.com. That's the best place. We have a lot of information and a great way to get it connected with me or ask questions about the summit or anything regarding that.
And why should people actually do this again? And when is it? And what is that URL?
It's October 25th through the 27th, Tom. We'll have the Agile Online Summit. So we're going to have, as we mentioned, 10,000 people together. It's a 3-day event. As we talked a little bit before, it was 5 days before, but we've crammed it down. We want to make it more exciting and more engaging. So head on over to agileonlinesummit.com and join us.
And obviously, we'll have all of those connections in the show notes. Tom, it is always a pleasure, and it is fun to talk controversial things with you, because you are one of those people who actually think about this as you're engaging the whole industry and trying to make it better. Obviously, if we don't start confronting and having these hard conversations, we try to do the same thing over and over again. And I've heard somebody that I guess it was, it was Einstein that everybody says said it. I don't know whether or not that's actually true because I can't find the source. But doing the same thing, expecting a different result is not exactly sane. But so I enjoy the conversations because you're always changing the paradigm. Thanks again, Tom Henricksen, for joining us on the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. As always, enjoy the conversation as well.
In Reread Saturday News, next week we begin the reread of Mick Kirsten's Project to Product. I will be reading from the Kindle version of the book, published by IT Revolution. The book includes a foreword, an introduction, 9 numbered chapters, a conclusion, and resources. We'll not reread the resources. This works out to be about 342 numbered pages for the Kindle version. I have read this book twice, most recently during a book club. I hang around with geeks and actively leverage the ideas from the book in my practice. Buy a copy today, link in the show notes, and next week we will start to reread. In upcoming events, fancy this, the Agile Online Summit is coming up October 25th through the 27th. This is the premier Agile Online Conference. I'm looking forward to this as I do every year. Link in the show notes to register. Tell them the Software Process and Measurement Cast sent you. Next week, we discuss the transactive memory. My wife remembers things like special events and then clues me in if she's around. Coaches and Scrum Masters often act as the official process memory for teams until they don't. When they move on, the team more often than not forget and revert back to other ways of working. Transactive memory is efficient. A team is more than the accumulation of memories they all share, but has risks. I miss calling my father on his birthday this year. A failure in so many ways, but also a failure of transactive memory. Jeremy Berrio will also bring his QA Corner to the podcast. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?